Hi, I'm Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work, and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Welcome to this episode. It's great to have you here. I just want to say I love that I get to connect and speak with you in this way. Just before I hit record on this episode, I had this overwhelming sense of gratitude. I'm feeling grateful that I get to host this podcast and that you take the time to listen. You know, I love sharing these insights with you, and I'm hugely grateful that you choose to spend your precious time with me. So I just wanted to share that with you before I dive into today's episode, which is all about delegation. I mean, we know as working mums that to have it all, we can't do it all. So delegation is a key strategy that can support us. But in my experience, there are so many of us that struggle with delegation. And it's not just my experience. The research also shows this too. So in this episode, I'm going to be sharing why women struggle with delegation and what we can do about it. I'll be diving into the benefits of delegation, the common challenges with it, and also practical strategies to help support you to do it more effectively. So firstly, let's start with what is delegation? You know, we probably all know it, but let's just frame it. It's our ability to assign tasks that we're accountable for to other people. And it typically involves transferring the responsibility to complete the task to another person. And if we were to look at the benefits of delegating, they're actually quite interesting, because I think so many of us forget the breadth of the benefits. We think about it in terms of getting someone to help us out, you know, taking the workload and overwhelm off us. So we tend to think of it as someone doing us a favour. And whilst that can be true, it's not actually the full picture of the benefits and leaves some of the important impact off the table. So the obvious benefits to delegation is that it frees up your time. It enables you to achieve more and actually use your time more efficiently and effectively. But it is so much more than just efficiency and productivity. It's also about leadership. It allows us to be more strategic, which is important as we progress in our careers. And it also allows us to help develop other people, which is a huge leadership skill. And one of the things that I've come to learn over my nearly 2 decades in leadership development is that without delegation, we can get stuck in our leadership journey. And it's important to say, whether you officially hold the position of a leader in your work or not, you absolutely hold a position of leadership in your life, often with a CEO of our homes. And as one woman called it, her position, the CIO, the Chief Infant Officer. So we're all in a leadership capacity, whether we hold the official title for it or not. And there's a leadership development model that I use in my work called the leadership pipeline. And the theory of this model is that throughout our careers, we go through these critical passages, these almost critical transitions. So in our career, we often start as an individual contributor, where we are measured by our individual contribution and our individual work. And if we're good at that, we might get promoted to be a manager. And then if we're good at that, we might get promoted to become a manager of managers. And then we might then get promoted to be a functional leader and then an enterprise leader. So those 5 stages are individual contributor, manager, manager of managers, functional leader, and enterprise leader. And we may not go through all of those transitions to actually progress, but at each stage to progress, we have to stop doing some stuff and start doing other stuff. So kind of going from being an individual contributor to a manager requires us to stop doing it all ourselves and to start delegating and achieving through others and with others. But the leadership pipeline theory is that we get stuck in the pipeline. So the pipeline gets blocked and there are particular behaviours that keep us stuck. And one of those behaviours is not embracing delegation and not doing it effectively. So it's a huge amount of work that I might do with my clients around this, because it can really impact us in terms of our own leadership development. And when we do delegate, it not only helps us, but it helps others. It really helps to develop those around us. It gives them the opportunity to learn and to progress. It also can give them visibility. It can help create a succession plan. So we've developed others around us to allow us to step up in our career without leaving a skills or talent gap. And sometimes that can block our progression if there's nobody to step up and step in when we move on. It allows us to be more strategic. And when we delegate well, it helps other people focus on their zone of genius. It gives them stretch opportunities. It can help others to realize their potential. And it can also really develop trust, that people feel that we trust them, and develops that psychological trust. The fact that we're willing and able to delegate builds that kind of trust that's important in high performing teams, and can really help that feeling of empowerment, both you as somebody that is delegating, but also empowering those that we delegate to. And when I was preparing my thoughts for this podcast episode, as I was thinking about the benefits and people that delegate well, it reminded me of my first boss in the corporate world. It was a guy called Moni Pangali, and he actually hired me during my university degree. So I did a 4-year degree. So it's 3 years at uni with a year out in industry in the middle. And what happened was a load of organisations went round the universities, kind of did the milk round at universities, hiring placement students. And Moni was a sales director in a technology company. And he was known for a number of years. He'd hired placement students to come and support him. And I got hired this particular year. And I soon realised, and looking back, I absolutely realise it now, he was a master at delegation. And it transformed my career. So he had limited budget to hire a sales and marketing kind of coordinator. So what he did was he went out to universities and hired placement students that were effectively cheap talent. And it was great for me because I was looking at getting experience in industry and would build my CV. But it also gave him access to somebody that was kind of driven, conscientious, and was at that point in their career where they just wanted to learn and soak it all up. And he threw me in at the deep end. He completely stretched me. He gave me unbelievable visibility in the organisation and in their wider stakeholders. He threw me in at the deep end. I was organising conferences across Europe, and he just had complete belief in my potential. I'd got no background in doing this, but he trusted me and he supported me. And it was the best catalyst for my career. So I ended up being hired back as a graduate. But more than that, I had this innate understanding of my potential, and nothing fazed me because I was given kind of opportunities that had really stretched and grown me. So my comfort zone and my self-esteem was built through it. So it can absolutely be a win-win when we delegate. We benefit from it, but other people do too. So if that's the case, why do so many of us still have a hard time doing it? Well, Professor Akinola, who's an organisational social psychologist, conducted some research into this area, and her research found and backed up that women do have a harder time delegating. And actually, the main reason for this is our socialised gender roles. Because women are raised to be more communal, so we're more kind of sympathetic and nurturing and sensitive and helpful. And we're not necessarily innately that way, but we are socialised to be that way. And where men tend to be raised and boys tend to be raised to be more agnetic, so assertive, independent, task-driven and confident. And often women see delegating as being assertive. therefore, we kind of look at it in a more negative light, that will be perceived as being demanding if we do it. And actually, we know from the research that if women are seen to be demanding, it really damages our perception. People are less likely to trust us and want to work with us. And as a result, we tend to feel more guilt and anxiety in doing it, kind of fearing this backlash of either being judged as too assertive or domineering. But the research shows that women who do delegate outperform those that don't. So when, as women, we can reframe delegation in a way that helps us bring out those more communal aspects, that it helps others to learn, develop and grow, we feel more comfortable about doing it. We therefore do it better, and everyone reaps the benefits. But we've also got to be aware of how our personality and preferences can mean it's harder to delegate. If you're high on drive, conscientiousness and striving, my experience is that these qualities can make it more difficult to delegate if we're not careful. And also if you're a people pleaser, it's almost like those strengths can become overdone and become shadow behaviours that make it more difficult to delegate. We feel that kind of to get the job done, we have to do it ourselves, either because nobody does it as well as us or as quickly as us or as thoroughly as us. Or we have this kind of need for control and perfectionism and people pleasing that stops us from doing it or doing it effectively. So as you're listening to me sharing these aspects that can make it more difficult to delegate, just check in with yourself. Does feeling uncomfortable delegating feel familiar to you? I know it has in my life. I remember the first time I hired a cleaner to help me manage the domestic load. I felt huge amounts of shame in doing it. Somehow in my head, it meant that I wasn't a good enough woman to look after my own home. So there was that guilt and anxiety about doing it. And I also know it's taken me far longer than it probably should have done to hire a team in my business. As a solo business owner, I spent well over a decade doing it all myself before I started exploring delegating to others. Although I'd done it kind of in my corporate career, I really struggled to do it in my own business. Then in 2021, I actually fully stepped into my leadership again as a business owner this time, and now kind of have this thriving and growing team that I'm incredibly proud of. But building that team has really taught me some huge lessons in delegation, and I'll kind of come on to those in a little while. So we've looked at what delegation is, what the benefits are, and what some of the challenges are. But now it might be useful to think about, well, what do we delegate? And there are some different ways to look at tasks that we can delegate. And there are some obvious ones. So things like small tasks. And this is one that's often really easy to overlook because these small tasks are probably relatively easy to do and on their own may not take up much time. And it may feel easier to do them yourself. And you might even enjoy them. But if you add them all up together, you can get stuck doing a lot of shallow tasks. And Cal Newport talks about the importance of doing deep work that makes a strategic difference and has high leverage, high value impact. And actually getting caught up in these small tasks gets us stuck in the shallow rather than the deep work. So they're often good ones to delegate. Also, repetitive tasks, if they have a repeatable process to them, they're often ideal to delegate. Time-consuming tasks, unless they're kind of high leverage and need your specific expertise, those tasks can often be delegated to free up more of your time. Often tasks that can develop others, if we put our succession planning hat on, is there an opportunity to help someone learn, grow and progress, even if it's challenging work and even if it's work you enjoy doing yourself? Again, thinking about that wider impact. Perhaps tasks that someone else could do better, that they're in their zone of genius. It's interesting, earlier this year I was running an online masterclass and the back-end process to that is actually quite complicated to set up. It needs a number of different systems to talk to each other and to have it all automated. And over the years, I've taught myself how to do this and can do it, but I don't enjoy doing it and it takes a lot of time. And this year I delegated the whole process to my amazing assistant, Laura, who was in her zone of genius and she loved doing it. She did it brilliantly, far better than I could have done. and was actually really grateful to add it to her skill set and her portfolio, and has gone on to offer this service to other clients. So, just remembering that wider impact again. Another thing that's often good to delegate is something you've done for a while, and a fresh pair of eyes could add value. It perhaps brings more creativity and innovation. Tasks that drain you, if you're doing something that you don't enjoy and isn't in your zone of genius, and you're not going to be at your best doing it and not going to do your best work, and if you are, it probably is going to take more energy than is helpful to do it. For me, this is definitely bookkeeping in my business. Getting someone else to do it is worth the money I pay them, because it just drains the hell out of me. But also another one to think about is tasks that are not your responsibility. And I know that's a bit of a bizarre one to think about, but often we collect tasks on our to-do list that aren't actually ours. Maybe you offered to help somebody out on an exciting new project, or maybe you were trying to be helpful. Maybe you just couldn't say no to somebody. If you find yourself with more stuff on your to-do list than you can actually achieve without impacting your effectiveness and your well-being, then I really encourage you to go through your activities and honestly ask yourself the question, does this require my personal involvement or my specific expertise? And if it doesn't, I'd strongly get you to think about who or how you could delegate it. So there are some of the ideas about what we can delegate. And actually, there is far more than we realise that can be delegated. But it's also important to say that there are some things that shouldn't be. And I haven't got a definitive list, but perhaps some of the things to think about is something that has been specifically and exclusively given to you to complete, due to your knowledge, expertise, or experience. I wouldn't then hand that off without carefully thinking about it first, because the chances are that has been given to you for a very specific reason. Perhaps something that you have a legal obligation to complete. For example, I couldn't delegate the signing off of my corporate accounts to somebody else. As the business owner, that's my responsibility. And, things that have legal restrictions around them. Crisis management, because often that needs our personal leadership to resolve. And perhaps things are delicate or sensitive in nature. So I would always think there is far more than that we can be delegated than not, but to do that check is really useful. So how do you delegate in a way that makes you and the other person feel good? Well, firstly, I think it's really important to say that piece about it's about the mindset. It's about embracing letting go of doing it all. Embrace that you're also helping others by asking for their help, just like my boss Moni did for me earlier in my career. And it's about embracing stepping into your leadership. Once we've kind of in that mindset, then it's about setting yourself and the other person up for success. And a way to do that is to understand the type of task that you're delegating and be really clear on the expectations. And I want to share with you, there's actually 5 levels of tasks to think about when we're delegating. So level 1 to 5. Level 1 is a kind of do as I say. And what that means is you've got very clear and exact expectations on how it needs to be done. This means to do exactly what I've asked you to do. Don't deviate from my instructions. I've already researched the options and determined exactly what I want you to do. So in that instance, you would be delegating the exact requirements. The second level of delegation is almost a research and report. This means you're kind of delegating the research, the topic, getting the person to gather kind of the information and report what they discover so that you can jointly discuss it and make that decision and then agree a way forward. The third level is research and recommend. This means you're delegating the research of the topic, outlining the options and getting them to bring you their best recommendation. So almost like give me the pros and cons of each option and then tell me what you think we should do. And then we again will agree it and I will authorise kind of how we're going to move forward. The fourth level is decide and inform. And this means you're kind of delegating them to make the decision around it and then just tell you what they did. So you're kind of trusting them to research, make the best decision and then just keep you in the loop. And level 5 is around acting independently. This means you're delegating whatever decision to them you think is best. There's no need for them to report back, and you trust them completely. You kind of know that they'll follow through, and they've got your full support to do that. So I think it's useful to hold in your mind, what degree are we asking here? What level of delegation? Have they got to follow very specific requirements, or are you empowering them to kind of follow whatever process they want? And it can also be useful to think about that kind of as a metaphor of a tree. And this comes from Susan Scott's work in her book, Fierce Conversations. And I often think this image kind of helps me think about at what level am I delegating. And in her work, Susan recommends that you work out what type of task you're delegating and ask yourself, is it a leaf, a branch, a trunk, or a root decision? A leaf level decision is almost like a single leaf on a tree can be plucked without consequence. And what we're saying is we're allowing people to make leaf level decisions on a regular basis. They can kind of get on with it. And if they get it wrong, it has very little consequence. Generally, kind of the rule around this is of a leaf decision is make the decision and no need to report it. A branch level decision, much like leaves, an entire branch of a tree could kind of sustain damage and eventually grow back without kind of impacting the whole tree. And a branch level decision really is an increased level of trust, but still allows for great autonomy. So what you might be saying here is define the problem, make the decision and act on it, but just let me know what you choose to do and why and what the outcomes were. A trunk level decision, and if you think about it, a trunk of a tree can only sustain minor damage before it impacts the whole health of the tree. So anyone making decisions that affect the trunk of a tree kind of have to have absolute trust and typically can't make the decision without consulting others. So it might be define the problem, develop a solution, make the decision, but discuss with me and gain approval before you implement it. And then root level decisions, it's almost like an organisation, like an interwoven, complex kind of source of life. Without strong roots, there's little chance of survival. Therefore, kind of root decisions tend to be a centralised one, and there's often other people involved in the decision-making process. So what we would kind of say there is kind of come up with some potential options, but we'll make the decision as a team, and ultimately probably people more senior than us will make that decision, but they can be involved in a part of that. You can delegate part of that to them. So once you're clear on the type of task that you're delegating, it's then important to make clear your expectations. Is there a specific outcome you're expecting, or maybe a range of outcomes? What are your expectations regarding the process they follow, the progress they need to make, and how to communicate this and the outcome? When you can be clear on the expectation, you can be clear on the outcome, you can be clear on what success looks like for this particular task, and clear on the communication you need, you set the other person and yourself up for success. And this is something I've learned a lot about over the last couple of years in my business. I'm lucky to have a phenomenal business manager that works alongside me, Lauren, and she really complements my approach to and skills really in the business. She helps me manage my team, and she is the queen of process, which is not my strength at all. If I'm not careful, my big picture thinking, I naturally really empower people, and I can be over optimistic, and that can lead me to delegate ineffectively. And what that means for me is I might not give enough guidance or detail. So what Lauren's helped me do in my business is to put in place standard operating procedures, what we call SOPs, which has been transformational. So if you've not come across them, a standard operating procedure is like a written set of instructions that describes almost a step-by-step process that must be taken to perform a particular task or routine or activity. And what they help do is ensure consistency, and they're really clear on the expectation, what needs to be done and how. So when someone joins my team, we outline their responsibilities and we have a dashboard that, depending on what their responsibilities are, they have got their standard operating procedures, either in a written document or in a recorded video with the processes they need to follow. And kind of creating and formulating our standard operating procedures has meant that we have huge amounts of flexibility and adaptability in my team. If a team member goes on holiday or is off ill, another member can pick it up easily by just following the standard operating procedure, the SOP that we've got in place. We've also realigned responsibilities just in the last week to help a team member pick up a new task that's really aligned with their zone of genius, but actually handed over one of her tasks that she was doing to another member in my team. And this was literally such a smooth transition as they got to just pick up the SOP and do it with me having to redelegate or re-explain the process because it's all documented and ready to use. And, it's important to say that not all tasks need that level of detail. In fact, in some instances, that level of detail could be absolutely micromanaging. But there are some tasks that I just empower my team and they can do it however they feel best as long as it meets the outcome I've outlined. But actually, my natural tendency is to undermanage, not micromanage. So just check in with yourself. What's your natural delegation style? Are you more at risk of micromanaging or undermanaging? Because part of delegation is agreeing not only the task and the outcome, but your expectations on how they complete it. Are they fully empowered to do it their own way, or is there a specific expected way of doing it? Where possible, I love to empower people because I never fail to be inspired by how people can find new and better ways of doing this, things that I do. My team literally makes me look better than I am because they do stuff kind of even better than I could have imagined doing it myself. And that's the power of delegation, letting others shine in their zone of genius. And that's when it becomes a win-win. Now, when you're a manager or a leader, the lines of delegation can often be clear. A direct report is often expected to be delegated to. But what if you don't have any direct reports? And often many of us are working in matrix cross-functional organisations where we may not have direct authority. And actually, there are more opportunities than we might think to do this. And for many people, we might be missing opportunities, even if you do have direct reports, to think wider and broader in terms of your support network. There are, as I said, there's often more opportunities than we realise to delegate, perhaps to peers and to other stakeholders. But in these instances, we don't have line manager responsibility. So it's quite useful to think, how do we do it in a way when we don't have direct responsibility for the output and activities? In these instances, it can be useful to think about it more of a request for support than like an act of delegation. And you might need to think more about your communication style to kind of change it slightly. There's likely more of a need to think of a selling approach, thinking about what's in it for them. Maybe they get to expand their experience and skill set. Maybe they get visibility on a high profile project, or perhaps maybe they get access to a new network or to build their connections. So perhaps start with sharing why the reasons this task is so important. Share the value of them taking on the task and what they may gain from it. And then it's about agreeing the right level of engagement, like what level of support and communication do they need from you? And also, how will you track their progress and hold them accountable to it? But I really want to highlight, please don't underestimate that there can be benefits for someone who isn't on your team to take on tasks. So don't discount it without exploring it. And that isn't just in the workplace either. Think creatively in your personal life too. And I want to give you an example of that. I'd been looking for somebody to help me with my ironing for a little while. It's a task that I weirdly enjoy doing, but only when I have the time to do it. And it's rare that I've actually got enough time to enjoy doing it. So it often becomes a repetitive task for me that's not my best and highest leverage use of my time. And actually, a few years ago, my neighbour approached me to see if I had any ironing that I wanted doing. And I would never have considered approaching her to ask if she was interested. But actually, her husband got diagnosed with cancer. And during his recovery, she had to give up her work to help care for him. And she started to look for work that she could do for home. to bring in an income during that time. And she turned out she was an amazing ironer, and the logistics of it worked out brilliantly for us because she was a neighbour. So what I really wanted to get you thinking about with this is delegation is a key skill to learn and develop. And it's the difference between being a workhorse and being a magician. And if you've not heard this analogy, you're going to want to go back and listen to episode 103 when I shared how to have more impact without working harder. In most of my coaching sessions, at some point, I help my clients move from using their willpower to get some stuff done and shift to using their personal power. And it really enables my clients to step up to become an effective leader in their life rather than just this supercharged individual contributor that's feeling the pain of trying to do it all themselves. And this really helps you to elevate your impact without overwhelming yourself. But it requires you to embrace kind of this unavoidable leadership paradox that to become more impactful, you actually need to become less involved. If you're holding on to work and you're struggling to delegate, you might be actually getting confused with being involved, with being valuable and impactful. And I'm all about helping you to achieve more success, but in a more sustainable way. And delegation is a really useful way to help you do this. So I hope these insights help you to reflect on how you could be delegating more in your life, what might be getting in the way of you doing it, and some ideas on how you can do it effectively. Thank you for joining me for this episode, and until next time, take care. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too, so if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.